Okay, folks, how's everybody doing out there? What's happening? My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World, and we are live. So, got a lot of stuff to talk about again today, like we always do. We are getting close to our election, and things are just getting crazy out there. But while we're at it, let me go ahead before we start off and show you what we've been working on here for the last 3 streams. So we have here our, let me straighten that out a little bit. Actually, that is straight. It is my camera, which is funky. Anyway, so what we have here is our sort of fantasy kind of scene. There we go. No, hang on, let me just move that up just a little bit. I probably should have done all this before I started streaming. Anyway, this is our sort of fantasy stream with our little hobbit, halfling kind of person being surrounded by goblins or whatnot. And I think it's looking pretty good. So we'll just continue on with this. Let's get started, because we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Actually, I shouldn't put that there, in case that spills. That's going to spill all over my computer. Okay, anyway. So, why don't we start off with a little bit of good old-fashioned voter suppression. Alright, so I don't know if you guys have heard this story. Let me just do a quick Google search. Hey kitty, what are you doing in here? Alright, hang on. Before you go, I gotta get my cat out of the room. Come here. Come here. See, if I don't throw him out, he's gonna jump up on the table, knock all this stuff over, and I'll have paint going everywhere. Sorry, kitty. That is the one cat that I have that actually likes me. I have 2 other cats that don't really like me that much, and this is the one that actually likes me, but, you know. Sorry, anyway. So, let's see here. Here we go. So here's a story, which, if you guys haven't heard about this, it is pretty ridiculous. In California, you know, so we're talking about, okay, so there's a lot of you know, every election that comes around, there's a lot of shenanigans, you know, as far as voter suppression tactics go. And, you know, we talked about this a little bit last week with the governor of Texas, for example, trying to remove all of the drop-off boxes, you know, in Texas. Like, what he did is he tried to make it so that every district only had 1 drop-off box. The problem is that some of those districts are gigantic in Texas, you know, like not just physically gigantic, right? But like, you know, some of them have millions and millions of people, you know, and then other districts will just be like really small. And then, so yeah, there's a legal battle over that going. Last I heard, a judge ruled against that. And the governor of Ohio tried to do the exact same thing, which is funny. You know, it's funny, you always see this stuff also in red states. You know what I mean? Usually, you see this in red states. And now we have a story out of California. So let me turn on my left monitor here. California Republican Party says it will not comply with state's cease and desist order on ballot drop boxes. So what's going on with this story? Well, the too long didn't read on this one is that the California GOP basically has set up these phony drop boxes, which are illegal. And they've set them up around certain counties, you know, districts. I think it's Congressional District 45, I think is what it is. And they're basically not the real thing. They're run by the California GOP, right? So the thing about that is that, well, anybody who drops off their vote in there, it's completely at the mercy of the California GOP whether or not that vote will actually get deposited in a real drop box. And who's to say that they're not going to just be throwing it away somewhere, right? Now, I've heard other commentators talk about this and say, well, this doesn't really seem to be a very smart way to suppress the vote, right? And you got to keep in mind where this is happening. This is happening in a very somewhat conservative area, which is coincidentally not that far away from where I live, right? Up around Simi Valley in California. I live about 8 to 10 miles away from where this is happening, right here. And so let's just kind of read a little bit through this, okay? California Republican Party said Wednesday it will not comply with the state's cease and desist order over unofficial ballot drop boxes placed in at least 4 counties. Which is funny because this is against the law. They've got a court order to remove these, and they're not going to do it. So how come I don't see the people responsible for this being led away in handcuffs? Why is that? You know, if you get a court order to do something and you don't do it, then the next step is jail time. You know, you're in defiance of a court order. That is grounds for your arrest. And like if you were to do that, like let's say you owned a factory or something and you were dumping some waste into a river and then whatnot, and you got a court order saying you weren't allowed to do that anymore. If you just kept doing it, then your company could be fined and the people responsible could be thrown in jail. Why is it that the people responsible for this are not being held accountable in the exact same way? And this is actually something I heard on the Young Turks, where they were talking about this, and they're right. And it's a point that bears repeating. You know, why is it that whenever we see any types of shenanigans like this, voter suppression, trickery, that kind of rat fuckery that you get every election, why is it that nobody is ever held accountable for this at all? Anyway, so let's go back to the article. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but it's happening in at least 4 counties: Los Angeles, Ventura, Orange, and Fresno. These areas, Orange County, Fresno, Ventura, these are very conservative. Orange County is extremely conservative. And it's also like 99% white. I don't know if that's a coincidence. Right. Anyway, but yeah, Ventura County, this is right around where I live. I'm not going to tell you exactly where I live, although I'm sure full-time viewers of my channel here have probably figured it out by now. Right. Anyway, so, their contention is that this is a ballot harvesting program. Right. And the idea behind ballot harvesting is that, well, you give somebody the permission to drop off your ballot. So, like, let's say that if you have a ballot that, an absentee ballot or something, and you can't get the day off of work, you fill it out, and you give it to somebody else, and they go drop it off. But the idea behind ballot harvesting is that you have to basically sign over permission to somebody in order to do that. That's not what's going on here. What these are ballot boxes that are made to look like official ballot boxes, but don't actually say that they aren't, that are put there in order to trick people into dropping off their ballots there, and which gives the GOP of California complete control over their ballots. So, that's the thing, is that, well, it's not like regulated. There's nobody there making sure that any ballots that are dropped off in these boxes actually get delivered. So how do we know that they're not just taking them out back and shredding them? Right. This shit is supposed to be illegal. This kind of thing is supposed to be illegal, right? And I don't understand why nothing's being done about this. Let me turn this off. Right. I mean, I don't get how you can get away with that. right? Because, like I said, any other crime, and if any other person were to commit any other crime like this, they would be arrested, put in jail, right? But how come whenever it comes to election fraud, election vote tampering, and various other types of ridiculous, you know, fuckery like this, nobody ever gets put in prison? There was a story years and years and years ago. I think this was in 2008, and where some people in California were busted, right? And what happened was that they were going out and registering people to vote, and people would try to register as a Democrat, and they would register them as Republican, right? And not tell them. So then when the primary came around, all these people found out that they weren't able to vote in the Democratic primary, right? And you go, wow, that's kind of messed up. And then you think, well, why exactly would somebody do something like that? Like, what's the point of that? Prevent them from voting in the primary? Because it's basically manipulation, so that if there's a particular person that's running in that primary, they find out which area that guy's base is in, and then they go out and knock out a bunch of votes for him like that, you know? So, like, let's say that they think that candidate A will be easier to defeat than candidate B, and if candidate B comes from this particular area, let's go out and monkey with the primary in that area so that guy doesn't get elected. That guy doesn't become the candidate, so that way we get to fight against the weak the weak candidate, right? Shit like that happens all the time. See, it's not always just voter suppression is not always just kicking somebody off the rolls or blatant shit like that, sending out the fucking goons to go beat people up at the polls and shit. Like people are basically like afraid the Proud Boys and shit are going to do this election. It's not always like that. There's lots of little weird tricks, and that kind of thing. Like another one comes to mind. This one was from back in the 90s, where once again some young Republicans got caught. This time they were sending out flyers that had the date of the election on it, and this was like before the internet, right? And they had the date of the election on it, and one side of the flyer was in English and it had the correct date of the election, and the other side was in Spanish and it had an incorrect date. So basically it was a ploy in order to suppress the Latino vote in a particular area like that. And it's like that kind of ridiculous trickery, that sort of like, I mean, they call it rat fuckery, right? That kind of thing happens all the time, and not just in California, but around the country. And you hear about that sort of thing constantly, all around the country, and it's almost always Republicans, right? Specifically Republicans, and I say that there's a difference between conservatives and Republicans and all that blah blah blah. I'm talking about the actual Republican Party this time, not just people who vote Republican. I'm talking about the GOP, the organization, right? It's always them. They're always the ones that gets caught with their hands in the cookie jar. But when is the last time that any of these people ever got convicted? When is the last time you heard about somebody going to prison for voter fraud, right? Never. People who actually vote twice go to jail. That actually happened in 2016, and lo and behold, those people were Republicans too. But that happens so little, and it's like not even, a problem. Like, for example, there was a couple of stories in 2016 about a few people who voted twice by accident, because they sent in their thing and then they thought that they were able to, they thought that it didn't go through. Like, they sent in their ballot, and they thought their ballot didn't go through, so then they went down to vote anyway, and then it came back that, no, your ballot was counted, right? And that way, and voting twice is, you'll go to prison for that, for like 5 years for voting twice. So why is it that if I go out and I vote twice, even if it's an accident, even if I say, oh, so somebody contacts me and tells me, yeah, your ballot was not counted, come in and vote, and then I go vote, and it turns out I voted twice, how come I go to prison, but if a guy that sets up a phony ballot box, right, collects 3,000 votes and then takes those and dumps them in a river, that guy doesn't go to prison for it. Right? Why is that? Why does that happen every single time? You know, I mean, seriously? This is a an actual request. Can somebody find me an example of this type of election tampering that comes from the Democratic side? Right? Especially now in this latest cycle. Is there anybody out there? Are there any stories out there, you know, in the news now? I'll even take 2016. You know, any stories from 2016 that shows Democrats tampering with the election in ways like this, right? I don't remember seeing any now, but that just means that, you know, just because I don't remember doesn't mean that it didn't happen, right? But so please, that's, you know, somebody out there, please tell me, right? You know, are they, you know, because it just seems like you only hear one side of this, right? And is that true? Is it really only Republicans that monkey with elections like this, right? I mean, that doesn't seem right to me, but that's what the fucking evidence seems to say. And it's just unbelievable. I don't understand, man. Anyway, so that's a good way to start off, seeing how we've got about 3 weeks left before the big day. Everybody, if you haven't voted already, please go out and vote. I have filled out my card, just haven't had a chance to go down and drop it off. And I know it's an excuse. I'm going to do it tomorrow. For real. But I actually have filled out my ballot. So anyway, let's move on a little bit here. I want to talk about a story that came out a little while back, right? So first off, this is going to be sort of a meandering thing here, right? But let me, you know, stick with me, because I am going to, you know, tie up the loose ends in the end. Okay. All right. So a little while back, about you know, last week, I think, in Denver, there was a guy who was a security guard who shot a Trump supporter in Denver, right? And what it was is that this kind of exploded all over Twitter, right? Because this guy had a certain tattoo. So let me turn on my monitor here. I don't know if you guys remember this. Okay. So here's the guy, right? He had this Space Invaders tattoo. Okay. And it somehow got on right-wing Twitter that because he had a Space Invaders tattoo, that meant this dude was an antifa person. Right, because this obscure, well, I don't know if they're how obscure they are, but this one German artist basically made an anti-racism piece of art with, you know, the Space Invaders, you know, aliens in it. Right? And I think this story is kind of an example of what happens, you know, how people are willing to basically bend the truth, you know, because the theme of my live stream this week is, you know, liars, right? And this kind of goes to show you how far people are willing to bend the truth in order to spin things so that they match a certain narrative. So, what's the story behind this? Well, as far as the actual shooting goes, there was a protest. This guy with the tattoo was a security guard who actually worked for Pinkerton Security, right? Those of you out there who are aware of Pinkerton Security's history knows that they are not a left-wing organization in the slightest. They are the opposite of that. Pinkerton Security has a long, long history of union busting, of protest, you know, basically mainly union busting, but also like breaking up protests, right? The guy Pinkerton himself was very, very pro-corporate, very, very right-wing, in himself. If anybody out there, if you're interested, read the history of, Pinkerton Security. I actually read an article on it once in an anarchist magazine, believe it or not, years and years ago. Right? He was very anti-anarchist as well. Very, very pro-corporate. And he basically founded Pinkerton Security to bust unions. That's the history of Pinkerton Security, right? So but they're basically a security guard company nowadays, right? So yeah, not a left-wing organization at all. Okay, so trying to claim that Pinkerton Security, that this guy is a leftist because of a tattoo, right? Or because of his, because of his company or something like that is ridiculous. Okay. The fact that he has that tattoo is fucking meaningless. That's like the dumbest fucking thing ever. And you know what it smells like? It smells. God damn it! Where's my fucking red? Sorry, I'm looking for. I have some red paint around here, but I don't know what happened to it. Shit, that sucks. Anyway, oh well, we're just gonna have to use blood for the blood god here on this one. Anyway, that's what this smells like. It smells like somebody seeing this. So it smells like somebody like, say, Andy No, or some other, phony baloney right-wing journalist seeing this tattoo and going out there and let's turn this off, digging up something in order to try to blame it on Antifa. That's what that smells like, right? Because no sane, rational person is going to see a Space Invaders tattoo and think Antifa. All right, that's fucking ridiculous. Okay, Space Invaders is a video game by Taito, I think is how you pronounce that. It came out in like 1979 and shit. It was like one of the first big, massively giant hits in video games as far as like gaming in general goes. I mean, Space Invaders is older than Pac-Man, that kind of thing. It has nothing to do with politics at all, right? And to claim so is, I want to say the word retarded, but that's not a nice word. But that's the word I would choose if I was still somebody who said that. Right? Because, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and only idiots and simple-minded morons would even believe something like that. So, kind of goes to show that this was originally reported by a fake right-wing journalist named Ian Miles Chung. I think he was the guy that originally reported it. If not, he definitely picked it up. And then once it got to him, it got to Tim Pool, and it got to, like, all of these other phony baloney right-wing journalists who just basically lie for a living. If you don't know who Tim Pool is, he's a guy that claims to be a liberal, but in real life, he sort of, what he does is he goes out to protests, he goes out to talks, where like left-wing or right-wing figures are, and he basically tries to, Tim Pool, his entire like business model is getting people to do hateful things and violent things so that he can take video of it and then put it up out of context on his website or on Twitter, and then he gets views that way. So like he'll do shit like he'll go to a protest or something, and then a fight will break out, and he'll only show the part where like the Antifa guy punches somebody in the face, and then like he'll omit like the argument leading up to it, right? Where like the the right-wing dude basically provoked him or threw the first punch or some shit like that. Like that's what Tim Pool does, constantly, and you'll notice that a lot of right-wing guys, that's their MO. It's all a propaganda war to these people. And we'll come back a little bit to that later when we talk about Patriot Prayer in a few minutes. So yeah, makes no sense. It makes perfect sense that this got picked up by Ian Miles Chung, and his original article for this got something like 8,000 likes or whatever. So when he first put it up before investigating who the guy actually was, right? And then when it came out later that the guy was not an Antifa person, but a security guard, and that the person that he shot was spraying him with fucking mace, right? Because that's what happened, right? The Trump supporter guy that this dude shot, the security guard shot, was basically started a fight with him and started spraying him with mace. So the dude pulled out a gun and shot him because what he was, he's a security guard for a journalist, and his job is to protect the fucking journalist, right? So he was doing his job, because that shit, can basically mess somebody up. It could kill you, like that's the thing. They say things like mace and rubber bullets and all that stuff. They say those things are less lethal weapons. That doesn't mean that they're like not lethal weapons. That means you're less likely to die if somebody hits you with it, because you can die from exposure to mace. If you have, say, asthma, right, and you get hit in the face with some mace, that could trigger an asthma attack and it could choke you to death and kill you, right? I mean, that's why they don't say that it's not lethal. I mean, that's why they don't that's why they don't say that it's, harmless. They say it's less than lethal. Same thing with like all the other, pepper balls and rubber bullets and all of that shit. They can most definitely kill you, right? It just means that if you get shot with one of those versus like a real bullet, you're more likely to survive if you get shot with a rubber bullet or a pepper ball or some shit. So, yeah, that's what's going on with that. And it just kind of goes to show it's not about, especially when it comes to right-wing journalists, it's not about the actual story. It's not about what's actually happening. It's about getting out their agenda, Another good example of this, of course, is Project Veritas. If you guys don't know who Project Veritas is, they're basically a group of right-wing activists disguised as journalists. They're not really journalists because they don't actually report on any news. They go out and they try to engage in what they think is called gotcha journalism. But what they're really doing is they go out and they get a bunch of footage of people they don't like, and then they cut that footage up in such a way as to make the people they don't like look bad. And then they publish that in order to further a political agenda. So basically what they are hatchet men. They're smear merchants. That's what that's called. Okay. See, gotcha journalism, everybody, I think it was, Sarah Palin that coined that. I don't know if she coined it, but she used to say it a lot. Gotcha journalism is when you have an interview and you've agreed to the questions of the interview beforehand, and then when they actually do the interview, you go off script, and the person you're interviewing gets messed up because they're not ready. And it's sort of like, I didn't prepare for this question. And you go, gotcha, That's where that came from. So that's something that Sarah Palin used to accuse people of, because she was never ready for any interviews. Because I don't know if you've ever watched, especially those old interviews when Sarah Palin was like running for vice president, but she was a goddamn moron. And they would ask her shit like, what's your favorite book and stuff like that. And she couldn't fucking, like, what newspapers do you read? Right? Simple, ordinary questions that, like, anybody with a brain should be able to answer. And she couldn't, like, answer any of those. And so she'd be like, this is a gotcha question. It's like, how the fuck is, like, what newspapers do you read a fucking gotcha question, you goddamn moron? But anyway. So, Project Veritas does not do that. What Project Veritas does is they set up scenarios, right, that they think will make whatever target they're after look bad, right? And then even when it actually doesn't work, they take the footage and they cut it in such a way as to, make their target look bad. So an example of the big famous example is Acorn, if you remember Acorn, way back in the days. So what was Acorn? Well, Acorn was a political organization, right, that would go out, and their crime, according to Project Veritas, was helping people register to vote. That's what Acorn used to do. Acorn would go out and they would basically work with members in the community, and among other things, they would try to get people registered to vote. And for some reason, Project Veritas didn't like this. So what they did is they dressed a guy up like a pimp, and they had this guy go into Acorn and basically try to fool them into thinking that he was a pimp and he was trying to engage in human trafficking. Okay. And it didn't work. The guy behind the counter, and if you can find these videos on YouTube and stuff, I encourage you not to go to Project Veritas because I don't want them to like get money from this. You know, they don't deserve your money. So anyway, so it didn't work, and the guy from Acorn didn't buy it. Right? Didn't take the bait. Okay. So what they did is they just went back, they took the footage they had and cut it to make it look like he was going along with it anyway. And then this got released, and this caused the federal government, you know, because Obama was the president at the time, to cut funding because, you know, they were getting grants from the federal government, right? And this eventually led to Acorn closing up shop and people losing their jobs. So you got to remember that. See, you got to remember that this stuff is not innocent. It's not just like, oh, shots fired and yeah, we got them good, blah, blah, blah. You know, he basically caused people to lose their jobs, right? He put, you know, and who knows what happened to those people afterward. I mean, it's been a number of years, and hopefully they're all fine. But, I mean, imagine you're at your job and, you know, whatever, you're doing your thing, and then some fucking, like, smear merchant shows up, right, and puts together this horseshit story that runs in the newspaper and causes your boss to close up shop. You know, that's fucked up. That's what this guy did. That's what fucking Project Veritas does. All right. So this just is basically, you know, when you say like fake news, right? Because that's a real famous thing. You know, Donald Trump made the term fake news famous. All right. You got to remember, this is what real fake news is, okay? Because according to conservatives and Trump people and all that shit, when they talk about fake news, the way they frame fake news is any story that we don't like. Any news story that makes us look bad is fake. That's not what fake news is. Fake news is when you make up a story in the news out of whole cloth that has no basis in fucking reality, and you report on it like it's real. You know, they used to call this yellow journalism way back in the day. I don't know if you remember 8th grade history, you know, when they would talk about right around the Gilded Age, right around the turn of the century, you had all of these sort of like unregulated political newspapers that would just, right, you know, make up shit out of whole cloth, right? And then, you know, the term yellow journalism came around, right? That's what they use. That's basically what, you know, real fake news is. Real fake news is when you just make shit up, right, and run it for a reason. Okay. Now you do see a lot of that on the internet, and most of it is because it's like a humor sort of thing. You know, The Onion or Babylon. There's another one called Babylon Lee or something like that. Those types of things, right? And you know, we've all seen the Facebook posts of people eating the onion. You know, taking stuff that's obviously not real and posting it as, you know, pretending that's real or whatever. And it's funny, ha ha ha, and that's a big laugh, right? Well, you know, when you do that shit for political reasons, right, it's not that funny, you know. Especially when you have, like, a constituency that fucking believes anything. When you have the type of people that are posting shit on Facebook about how, you know, there's a secret kiddie porn dungeon underneath Comet Pizza in fucking, you know, in Washington, D.C. or whatever, when in real life there's like not even a fucking basement to that place, right? And when people are saying like, you know, they want the lead candidate to be arrested because of some kind of weird ass conspiracy where he's like kidnapping children from Haiti and like doing satanic rituals over their bones and eating them, you know, when you have people believing shit like that because of your fake news, right? Because of your that you publish on your website, that's a serious problem, you know. Um, if you guys have ever heard of Kyle Kalinski's a guy who runs a channel called Secular Talk, right? And he is pretty awesome. He's one of the guys I watch along with, like, I watch him, I watch David Pakman, I watch the Young Turks, I watch, there's another guy called Waldorf Nation, I watch that dude. Um, you know, these are sort of like progressive news and stuff on YouTube, among other things. They're not the only people I watch. I also watch a lot of other you know, people from various viewpoints in order to try to not be in so much of a bubble all the time. But these are my most favorite dudes, you know. These guys and like Democracy Now, stuff like that, right? Um, Kyle Kalinske in particular is very, very intelligent, but he has one thing I don't agree with him on. And the thing I do not agree with Kyle Kalinske on is this idea that platforms should not censor content, right? So his contention is that, okay, a platform like Facebook or something like that should not be in the business of truth telling, right? Because what you're seeing on Facebook and stuff a lot now, you're starting to see Facebook finally grow a sack and start you know, pushing back on some of this ridiculous fake news shit. Okay. Facebook is finally starting to do things like, and Twitter is too, you know, like they'll put up a thing saying this story is not verifiable, you know, something like that. This one is misinformation. Like Facebook is starting to do stuff like, you know, there was a story that came out about Joe Biden's son, and they put up a warning saying this story has not been verified, because it hasn't. It has not officially been verified just yet. It's like a rumor and shit, right? And you know, that kind of thing. Or Twitter will do some shit like Trump will tweet something about you know, the pandemic, and then Twitter will say this is misinformation. You know, like when Trump comes up and he says, yeah, you know, you don't have to worry about it. We can beat it. You know, whatever. Or I think one of the things he said recently was that 85% of the people who catch the virus were wearing masks, and he tried to spin it in such a way to make it sound like wearing a mask means you're gonna get sick, and then, like, you know, Twitter pushed back on that, right? And it's like, yeah, okay. So anyway, Kyle Kalinske, basically his opinion is that, well, these platforms should not be doing this, and the reason why is because if we allow them to basically fact check like this, if we allow them to control the narrative, then one day they're going to do the same thing to us. And, you know, he's got a good point. He's got a good point, because, you know, you don't want Facebook to basically be picking, or Twitter or something like that, being picking and choosing the content that their users can share, you know, within reason. I mean, obviously, like, if somebody were to do something like, say, you know, nobody would object to Facebook or Twitter stopping people from sharing content that's illegal, you know, things like kiddie porn, for example. You know, nobody would object to them stopping those types of posts, right? So it's like, you know, but when it comes to something like a fake news story, right? And I can kind of, you know, you don't really want to give them editorial powers, right? And I can kind of see his point, right? But at the very same time, what we're forgetting is that these types of news stories are very, very damaging as well, you know. So at what point does it become too dangerous, right? So do you allow, say, somebody to post a fake story about Comet Pizza, right? And something like that, and you allow that to go around, and then before you know it, some dude shows up at the pizza place with a gun and demands to, inspect the basement or whatnot. I mean, that actually happened. That's a real thing that happened, right? So, at what point does it become dangerous, right? So if you allow this sort of misinformation to circulate around, when is it too much? When can you say, okay, this content crosses the line, right? Traditionally, that's been when people's, personal information is shared, when they, something like that, when there are death threats against people, that kind of thing. But, to be honest, I don't really see that big of a problem with it, right? I could see how it can be very, very abused. I could see that you don't like, I could see why somebody like him, like Kyle, would not like the idea of a tech company deciding what is and what isn't acceptable, right? But at the same time, it's like, well, this is it's a serious problem what we're facing, right? This is not like, we've kind of gone beyond the point of allowing the market to decide this debate, okay? We've kind of gone beyond that because it's been shown that the market will decide whatever makes Facebook money, right? And what makes Facebook money is content like QAnon, you know? Right. That's that's basically, if we, in the marketplace of ideas, that's what sells, right? Is the truth does not sell. It's the shit that makes people feel good. That's what sells. Okay. So at what point do you say, okay, well, it doesn't matter. This stuff is like detrimental to like the stability of like the nation, right? And shouldn't be allowed. And and I can understand because it's like my position, and my position from the beginning is that Facebook and Twitter and Reddit and all of these other companies are not news organizations. Because they're not. They're not news organizations. They're content hosters. That's what they do. They host other people's content. Right. They host private content. So, they don't actually post anything themselves. They don't actually like create anything. Their entire business model is other people going and creating shit. Right. And they have a responsibility to make sure that the content they allow on their platforms is not harmful to anybody. Right. And included in that, I agree 100% that if they decide, information that is being shared on their platform is detrimental or harmful or false, then it's their platform. And as far as I'm concerned, they could do what they want with it. And that goes both ways, right? What if Mark Zuckerberg, for example, woke up tomorrow and said, you know what? No progressive news on Facebook. Kicks them all off. That's bullshit. It sucks. But you know what? Facebook is a content provider. They could do whatever they want. And you don't like it, go somewhere else. That's what I think, right? I think that's a lot. Now, that's a lot different than, say, for example, a hosting company or something like that. Although you can make rules for that too, right? For example, there was a big push about 10 years ago or so for various hosting companies out there to take down white supremacist websites, right? And it was like, the thing about it was that it wasn't like the government forcing them to do this. It wasn't, because I remember this because it was like Stormfront and a couple of other ones lost their hosting, and this was a big deal. This was about 10 or 11 years ago, right? And we had the same argument back then too, but the hosting companies are private companies, right? They can decide, what websites they want to host on their servers or not. And, you know, they're perfectly capable of making that decision, as far as I'm concerned. And that's a risk. See, the risk is, you know, the risk, I think, is bigger in forcing them to host stuff, right? Because, you know, these companies also have a First Amendment right, don't they? I mean, hey, we treat corporations like people in this country, do we not? You know, it's bullshit, and they shouldn't be treated like people, but they are. So, you know, a corporation has a public image to uphold as well. And if they decide we don't want to have racist content, we don't want to have sexist content, whatever, they can make that decision. But that can go the other way too. You know, we always got to keep that in mind. And they could wake up one day and decide they don't want to have, for example, any environmental activists or any anti-racist activists or anything like that on their channel. You know, and yeah, that would suck and that would be bullshit. So how do you stop that? How do you prevent, you know, how do you encourage them to keep the content you like? You use social pressures is what you do, right? You get people out there to boycott them if they kick off the people you like and keep the people you don't like. And I don't see anything wrong with that, because that's how pretty much we've had to interact with every other corporation out there ever since the beginning of time anyway. Right? You boycott them if they do shit you don't like, and you support them if they do things you do like, right? Why should it be any different with Facebook or Twitter or anything like that? You know? And that's kind of been my answer to this stuff all along. I mean, I've actually made videos about that in the past and all that shit. But anyway, kind of went off on a tangent because I said I was going to bottle the ends, and I will eventually here. Getting back to fake news, and in particular fake right-wing news. So why am I bringing all this stuff up, right? Well, a good example of this, I think, is the case of Michael Reinhold, right? If you guys remember that guy, he's in the news again, Michael Reinhold. He was the Antifa activist about 5 or 6 weeks ago. It was right after the shooting in Kenosha, you know, where not Daniel, but the guy at Rittenhouse went out and shot 2 people and killed him and all that, and was basically called a hero by the right wing in this country, right? Because he shot an Antifa guy and killed him, you know, in what he claims is self-defense, right? Well, a week after the 17-year-old kid Rittenhouse shot 2 people and killed one of them. In Portland, there was a shooting at another protest, and the guy's name was Michael Reinhold, right? I made a video about this. I don't know if you remember. You know, this is the guy that they got security footage of him coming out of a garage. And he was like keeping an eye on a certain person who ended up being the guy that he ended up shooting. And the right wing was saying that this security footage showed that he was stalking this guy and all that shit, when in real life it didn't, you know. And whatever happened to that dude? Well, he basically just was shot to death by federal marshals. Okay. The reason why this is in the news again is because Bill Barr and Donald Trump keep bragging about it. In particular, Donald Trump is bragging about federal marshals killing this guy. And he said during one of his recent COVID super spreader events that he disguises as a political rally, right? Because let's not forget, Donald Trump is still contagious, right? Basically claimed, you know, he was basically bragging about it. Said that, I think the exact quote was, well, I don't have the exact quote, but I'm paraphrasing. Said something like, they didn't even try to arrest him. They knew who he was. 15 minutes and it was over. Right. So he's bragging about how they shot this guy. So it's been in the news basically, like, what exactly happened to Michael Reinhold? right? He basically was, for all intents and purposes, assassinated by federal marshals. Okay. Please keep in mind that there are no police cameras, no body cams or anything like that of this altercation, so we don't know what happened. All we have is what the witnesses say and what the police say. These are the federal marshals, right, in this case. And what happened was this guy Reinhold was kind of went into hiding because he got some threats. He thought people were following him, and he was actually right. God, that looks like shit. I'm probably going to cover this up here. So let's just sort of work that into it. Let's pretend there are clouds over here. We'll just sort of work this over. After the shooting, you know, he actually did an interview with Vice where he told his side of the story. Basically said that the person that he shot was threatening him and a friend. And if you look at those security camera footage, you can see that the guy that he shot, was named, what was his name? I think I wrote it down here. Where is it? His name was Aaron Danielson, was the victim that was shot, right? He claims that this guy, Aaron, was threatening to stab him. The security camera footage shows Aaron Danielson holding a can of bear mace and one of those collapsible batons, which are illegal in California. I don't know if they were illegal in Portland. I know they're illegal in California because I wanted to buy one once. And the disadvantage of living in a liberal state like this is all the cool stuff like that is illegal. California, you're not allowed to own switchblades. You can't have any type of concealed trick weapon like that. No switchblades, no cane swords, no nothing like that. No collapsible batons, that kind of thing. Like you basically can't own anything beyond pepper spray as far as like that sort of thing goes in California, right? I mean, you can own, that and firearms. I could actually buy a firearm if I wanted, but I wouldn't be able to carry it out, right? So, yeah, But that's what this guy had on him. And apparently, this guy, Reinhold, thought that he had a knife too. And he claims that the dude threatened to stab him and his friend. And the fight started, and that's why he felt he had to shoot him in self-defense. He's claiming it was self-defense, right? So what happened to him? Well, he kind of went on the run a little bit, was a little hiding out, and apparently his friends didn't know where he was. But the federal marshals seemed to know where he was, because according to witnesses, they just sort of ran up in these two SUVs and just blew him away without saying anything. There are 22 witnesses. 21 of the witnesses say the police, the federal marshals in this case, did not announce who they were and did not give any warning. They just pulled up, jumped out of their cars, and shot Reinhold to death. They claim that he had a gun, right? He did have a gun on him. It was in his pocket. So he didn't pull his gun out. His gun was found in his pocket. All of the witnesses say that Reinhold did not have a gun on him, or did not pull a gun, and didn't even try to run, right? Didn't try to escape, right? All of the witnesses say that. Only one witness says that the police even announced who they were before firing, right? He also had a handgun in his pocket, and he had an AR-15 in a bag in the back seat of his car. It was not touched. So the claim is that he pulled a gun out. That does not match the evidence. That's bullshit, right? Please keep in mind also there is no body camera footage of what happened to Michael Reinhold, so we don't really know what happened, right? And like I've said in previous live streams, body camera footage, why do police have the police have body cameras like that in order to protect themselves, right? So that there's no question that what they did was legal and, you know, by the book. And when they don't turn that shit on, the only reason why they don't turn those things on is because they're covering something up, because they want to be able to break the rules without actually, you know, and not be held accountable. So to be fair, though, I don't know if federal marshals are required to wear body cameras. They should. If they're not, they should. It should be mandatory around the entire country as far as I'm concerned. Because then you wouldn't have questions like this. You wouldn't have, you know, people suspecting that there were political motives in play here. Right. So, there, that looks much better. Kind of looks like clouds right there, huh? Not bad. Wow, I surprise myself sometimes. Anyway, let's do the same over here. So, yeah, that's kind of what happened with him, you know, and basically the witnesses say that, you know, one of the witnesses thought that the police were drug dealers, and he thought it was some kind of gangland hit because they pulled up so fast and just jumped out of their cars and then just immediately fired. You know, apparently within, you know, 2 seconds, not even 2 seconds of them arriving, they started firing 10 shots, something like that. This guy, Reinhold, for his part, was eating a gummy worm and had a bag with him because he just like got out of a grocery store or some shit like that. He had no fucking clue what was happening. So yeah, and we don't know his side of the story because he's dead. You know, and that's the main big problem with this, right? Because, you know, he admitted to actually being the shooter. He admitted it, right? He went in an interview and said, yeah, I shot this guy. He says it was self-defense, right? So we know he did it. He should have gotten a trial. That's the whole point. You know, the entire point is this. The police are not supposed to be judge, jury, and executioner, right? They're supposed to go out and, you know, arrest people so that they can stand trial, and the only reason they should use deadly force ever is if it's unavoidable, if it's necessary, if it's the person they're trying to arrest is a threat to either them or somebody else. And deadly force cannot be avoided. That's the only reason they're supposed to use deadly force. They're not supposed to just drive up and blow somebody away because the president tells them to. And that's the accusation going around. You know, I'm seeing this in a lot of leftist and progressive, you know, circles. They're basically saying that this was like an execution. Donald Trump, you know, if he didn't order it, he's definitely fucking reveling in it. Right? And who's to say that he didn't have anything to do with it? We don't know. Right? He's certainly using it as a rallying cry at his fucking rallies. Right? And it definitely seems like, you know, at least he or Bill Barr had something to do with the decision to use deadly force in this instance. You know? And, you know, what really kind of stinks is, like, we'll never know. We'll never know what really happened, right? The media has just kind of moved on from this, you know? So this guy, you know, Michael Reinhold, like, he's not going to see any justice, right? And really, to be honest, the family of Aaron J. Danielson, the man that Michael Reinhold shot, they're not going to see any justice either. Okay? Because they don't have the opportunity now to see the person who shot their loved one, I guess. Right? Shot their family member, get his day in court, and, you know, go to prison. Right? I mean, and hey, what if it actually turned out that the guy didn't, you know, was justified in doing it? What if it actually turned out that, you know, this dude Aaron Danielson actually attacked them first with fucking bear spray and a baton, right? What if that happened? You know, what if somebody stepped forward with a cell phone video showing the actual, you know, altercation and all that shit? We'll never know, you know? Or what if he actually did it? What if he did it from a malicious way? What if he actually did stalk this guy, Aaron J. Danielson? Like, like all the right-wingers were saying that he was, right? What if he actually did come up out of that garage, see this dude, follow him, start some shit, and then kill him, right? We'll never know that either. Now we don't know, right? And all we have is one story versus, one side of the argument versus another side, and you get to choose who you want to believe now, because now there's never going to be any resolution to that. And that's the real tragedy. I mean, along with the fact that 2 people are dead now, right? 2 people who are dead who didn't need to fucking die, Along with that, the other tragedy, I guess, the secondary tragedy, I guess, is the complete lack of justice in this case all around. And that's the risk right there. That's the risk of what happens when you allow misinformation to take root. That's why I don't care if Facebook, fact checks a story or prevents misinformation on certain subjects from being spread around. That's why I don't care if Twitter decides to fact check the president, or like say, you know what, we're just not going to allow you to spread this story, this news story, because we don't believe it's accurate. That's why I don't care, because this is what happens when you have, this is a perfect example of misinformation getting out of control, right? And you didn't see shit like this, like back in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, we had lots of national strife in this country. It was pretty much, actually, I would say, worse than what we see today, right? We look at shit today and we say, oh, wow, this is pretty bad, it's awful, blah, 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 right? It was just as bad, if not worse, back then, I mean, shit, we haven't seen riot cops, like, sicking attack dogs on people, or spraying them with fire hoses, or opening fire into crowds with, live ammunition and shit like this, like, which used to happen during the 60s. But another thing we're not seeing is just, like, yet, crowds of random fucking people running around assaulting people and shit, like you saw back then as well. That's the hidden part of the civil rights movement that you don't hear about very much, are the counter-protesters that used to go around. And, you think that the Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer and all those guys are unique to the current situation. No, there were always these types of violent right-wing anti-protesters that just, basically spoke with their boots and their feet and their rifles, right? Another example comes to mind of, I think there was the Greensboro Massacre, where the KKK opened fire on a bunch of protesters and, like, killed 7 or 8 people. Shit like that used to happen all the time. And goddamn, I wish those fucking assholes outside would go away. Sorry, whenever I start streaming, we always get, like, people from outside who show up and have to, like, run around with their damn skateboards and shit. Whistling at each other. I sound like an old man, Get off of my lawn, you goddamn kids and your skateboards riding up and down the sidewalk. Anyway, why is that? I could go all day and not hear one loud-ass truck drive up and down the street, but the minute I start streaming, they're fucking all over the place. I don't understand how that happens. And right now, there seem to be, like, kids playing in my parking lot. I hope they don't fucking make too much noise. Anyway, how did we get onto this subject? Yeah, so this kind of brings us to Patriot Prayer. So we spoke a little bit about the Proud Boys last time, and I want to talk a little bit about Patriot Prayer. How much time we got? Shit, I've been streaming for an hour already. God damn. Well, anyway, let me see something here. How many people we got? Oh, we still got a couple of people. Cool. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. Um, Patriot Prayer is basically another militia type group. They are essentially the same type of thing as the Proud Boys, but less ironic and equally as violent, apparently. They are started by a guy named Joey Gibson in 2016, so they've been around for a little while, and they're sort of like a militia group, but at the same time they have a pretty heavy religious sort of tone to them. They start off their rallies and stuff with prayers and all that shit. Although the guy Joey Gibson claims to not be religious, but if you watch any video of their gatherings, they're pretty much indistinguishable from a church group. It's kind of what they sound like. Lots of lots of like have faith in God kind of talk, and like the Lord is, we're fighting for the Lord, and these people are lost in darkness and blah blah blah, and we have to take this country back for God. Lots of religious like language and such going on with their rallies and their talks and all that. And they seem, though, however, to leave their religion at the door when it comes to the actual protest, because they are, for all intents and purposes, essentially indistinguishable from the Proud Boys when it comes to the actual protest. They're all too ready, willing, and able to get into fights and to brawl in the streets and to carry lethal weapons with them to intimidate people, if not use them already. There has not been any evidence, though, of Patriot Prayer actually murdering anybody, so we can't go that far, but it's only really a matter of time. You show up at these places armed to the teeth, and the Antifa people are already starting to bring guns too, and it's like it's only a matter of time before we're gonna get like a fucking shootout in the middle of the street someplace, and like 50 people are gonna end up dying. Just watch. You don't think it'll happen. It'll totally fucking happen. But anyway. Because you got to remember, that the guy that got shot by this dude Reinhold, was armed. He had bear mace and an expendable fucking baton, and it's like now they're basically showing up with rifles, right? At this point, it's like they're starting to escalate. Both sides are starting to escalate. So, anyway, Patriot Prayer, they're kind of, they're like a militia. Tim Pool seems to hang out with these guys a lot. You see him covering their talks, stuff like that. And the leader of them, Joey Gibson, basically does the exact same thing that Tim Pool does. And what he does is that he'll go to a protest, he'll walk over to where, because there'll be a protest, right? And like these are happening in like Portland and Seattle, stuff like that. And usually there'll be a line. There'll be police kind of keeping the two sides apart. So on one side you'll have the counter protesters, the antifa types, the anti-racists, those people. They'll be hanging out on one side, and then you'll have Patriot Prayer and their goons on the other. And the leader, Joey Gibson, will walk over to the antifa people, under the guise of friendship. But basically what he'll do is go over there and provoke them so that they'll start hitting him, is what he'll do. He'll basically walk over there, start calling them names, he'll start doing shit like that, and the Antifa people will start hitting him with the signs or punching him, shit like that. And the reason he does this is so he can get it on video. So then he'll get video of himself not fighting back. Then he'll walk back over to his side, and then he'll upload the video to, Facebook or whatever, even though they've been pulled off of Facebook. Patriot Prayer has been pulled off of Facebook. At least they were last month. I don't know if they're back already. But last I heard, they weren't on Facebook anymore. But anyway, he'll put that up on the internet and use video of it as a recruitment tool, right? And then Tim Pool will take the video and put it up on his site and smear Antifa people with it and say, see how violent these people are, blah, 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 blah. And it's basically just a tool. It's like a recruitment tool as far as Patriot Prayer and Joey Gibson goes. It's a propaganda tool as far as Tim Pool goes. And it's essentially manufactured. And this is what he does. He'll do this. He'll go to these things. He'll get plenty of footage of that sort of shit, you know, so that he can put it up and basically get people to join his fucking organization, right? And it's kind of like Project Veritas, you know, like they don't really care about the actual story. It's all really just about, you know, getting their agenda out. It's about propaganda. It's about, you know, it's about pushing their narrative. And it doesn't really matter what actually happens in real life, right? If, you know, the fact that he went over there and provoked these people or started the fight himself, some shit like that or whatever, none of that really matters. It doesn't really matter what the actual truth is. All that really matters is how can they bend it to fit their own agenda, you know? How can they, you know, twist the truth, you know? How can they lie and take advantage of it for their own agenda, right? And, you know, you don't really see this tactic on the left very much. Maybe it's something we should start doing. Maybe we should, you know, the next time one of you guys is at a protest or whatever, and you see a big group of Proud Boy types or whatever, get your friend to film it, walk over there and let them smack you around a little bit. You know, and get it on film that you're completely, you know, 100% peaceful, just trying to talk to them, and then, you know, they react all violently and shit, then go on Reddit and put that on, you know, public freakouts or some shit, and be like, hey, look at these fucking, you know, maybe we ought to, like, beat them at their own game, right? You know, because, and you might be saying, oh, Mark, that's dishonest. Well, you know, fight fire with fire, right? I'm serious, man. It's like the other side doesn't give a shit about the truth. They don't really care about, you know, they don't actually care about objective reality, nor do they care about, you know, like shame. You know, like that was the big thing for a little while. We could use shame as a weapon against these people, that kind of thing. They don't really care about that. That's over with, right? It kind of reminds me of, for example, when Donald Trump was first elected in, you know, a few years ago, Elizabeth Warren kept trying to pick fights with him. I don't know, do you guys remember this? Elizabeth Warren would pick fights with him on Twitter, stuff like that. And what she was doing was she was basically trying to position herself for a 2020 presidential run. I don't know if you guys remember that, right? And one of the things that, you know, so she would get in Twitter wars with him, stuff like that. She would try to call him out in the media, you know, and Trump just kind of stomped all over her. And if you remember, right, one of the things was she made a bet with him for $1 million, you know, that, because he keeps calling her Pocahontas, right, because he's a racist piece of shit. And so she went and got a DNA test to show that she has Native American ancestry, right? And she goes, I'll bet you $1 million I have Native American ancestry, right? And he goes, okay. So then she goes and gets the test, and it shows that she has something like, you know, 18% Native American ancestry or whatever, right? It wasn't that much. It wasn't enough to, like, claim that you're a Native American on your, like, you know, college entrance or whatever. But, you know, she still went around and said, okay, see, now I've proved it. I proved I have Native American ancestry. Now you need to pay $1 million to, you know, charity. And he basically said no and told her to fuck off. And I remember watching an interview, like Donald Trump was on the news. And somebody, like, the news guy brought that up and said, oh, well, are you going to pay $1 million to charity? And he said, nope. And he goes, yeah, but, you lost the bet, and she actually has Native American ancestors. And Donald Trump's response was, who cares? And it was just like, yeah, who cares? And that's kind of the point. Like, it doesn't matter. Attempts to shame the right wing don't work anymore because they don't care, right? Attempts to like turn around and debate them, debates don't work. Debates don't work because they don't give a shit. You saw that presidential debate, a couple of weeks ago. It was a disaster. It was a disaster, and Donald Trump in particular was a disaster, and he wouldn't shut the hell up. You know, he's basically whining and crying like a little fucking baby, interrupting and stuff like a goddamn man-child. Biden has to tell him to shut the hell up, which I think really was the highlight of that debate, right? And, even though every single poll that came out afterwards said Donald Trump crashed and burned during that debate because he was a fucking petulant imbecile who wouldn't shut the hell up, the actual Republican voters and Trump supporters don't care. They don't give a shit. And immediately when you go on Twitter and Reddit and all this other stuff, and you go to like the conservative parts, like I went to like Our Conservative and all that, and you just basically see like, all the cheerleaders coming out and saying Donald Trump is so strong, blah, 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 because they don't actually care. And even those people who watch that and know it was bullshit still don't care, because conservatives are not interested in the truth. They're not interested in the truth. They're interested in pushing their agenda. They don't actually care that the person they're voting for is an authoritarian, insane person with like the IQ of a fucking, small child and the attention span of a fucking insect. And they don't give a shit. They care. Oh, fuck you! They care about their agenda, right? And that's why shit like debating doesn't work. That's why, trying to confront them with the truth about anything doesn't work. It used to. It used to during the Bush years, and this is why Bush was vulnerable to this shit. Because back then, Republicans weren't as crazy, and they were still, they still responded to reality. And this is why, like, that's basically the reason why John McCain and Sarah Palin fucking lost so hard. Now, if you remember that election, they got stomped in that election. They didn't just lose. Sarah Palin and, like, it was like 330 electoral votes to like, 150. That was a major ass kicking, right? 2008. It was pretty fucking bad because back then, they were still vulnerable. Republicans, conservatives were still vulnerable to the actual truth. They were vulnerable to facts. They actually cared that, most of them at least actually gave a fuck if the shit they believed was true or not. And they don't anymore because they've been radicalized, right? And it actually started happening right around then, right? When people would vote for Sarah Palin, even though it was obvious to anyone with a brain that she was a complete imbecile, and they voted for her anyway. And it was right around then that the crazy people, the inmates, started taking over the asylum. When it came to the conservatives, at least, right? And now it's in full swing. And this is why you're actually seeing a pretty big push from the Republican side against Donald Trump. You have, what are those guys called that are making those ads? The Lincoln Project or whatnot. And then you have another one called Republicans Against Trump, and it's like, those are the actual conservatives and Republicans that have integrity, right? They've jumped ship already. And the only people who are left are the fucking crazy people, the inmates, the QAnon types, right? Like that guy that stood up when Donald Trump went on his little fucking wild safari around the hospital when he should have been like when he was still sick with COVID and shit. In fact, he is still sick. I don't know if you guys remember that. About 2 weeks ago, it was about 3 days after Donald Trump went into the hospital. He comes out. He takes this photo op, he drives around in a car so that all the crowds and shit that are around wishing him well can like see him and stuff. And, while he's doing this, he's exposing the Secret Service agents with him to fucking COVID, right? I don't know if you remember that. That was kind of a big deal. And there was video of like people in the crowd screaming, and one dude is like, "I would die for that man." You remember that guy? Those are the people that are like in charge now. Like all of the normal, ordinary conservatives who just cared about maybe like, you know, lowering taxes and maybe were against abortion or something. All of those conservatives have already jumped ship, and they're either not voting or they're going to vote for Biden. So only the insane people are left, right? The insane people who scream at cars going by where the, you know, that screaming their undying fucking loyalty, you know, to their messiah and shit as he drives around infecting his bodyguards with lethal disease, right? Though those are the people who are left, and it's like, oh, Jesus Christ. Anyway, so yeah, I wanted to talk about Patriot Prayer for a bit. Holy crap, did I actually get through all of my prepared material? Jeez, I think I did. I usually don't. I am very surprised. Crap, am I like out of shit to talk about now? I don't know. I might be. Maybe we should end this a little early. I mean, it's only been an hour and a half. I usually go for 2 hours during the streams. Let's take a look at what we got so we can kind of, there we go. Not too bad. It's coming along, starting to do a little bit of detail over here, stuff like that. It has, yeah, I think I think it's coming along here a little, you know. I'm getting used to it again, because like I said, I haven't painted in a long time, and it's actually very therapeutic. Anyway, let's see, I got one more thing. Let's talk a little bit about QAnon. So, here's a interesting story that I found here. Let me turn on my monitor. Okay, this is from the Colorado Times Recorder. QAnon child abduction conspiracies impede Colorado efforts to stop actual human trafficking. So, what's the story with this? I could read a little bit of it, I guess. Okay, over the past few weeks, Colorado's human trafficking hotline has been very busy. An increased number of callers are reaching out, many of them believing they've witnessed perpetrators or victims. The Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking is a Denver-based nonprofit that operates the hotline and runs other programs including first training, blah, 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 blah. Basically, the gist of this is that the people who are out there actually working to stop human trafficking, actually making a difference, are being flooded by phone calls from QAnon and other conspiracy theorist types who are clogging up the lines with fake, phony baloney leads. And what it's doing is that it's taking up precious time and resources and preventing these people from actually doing their real work to stop actual real life human trafficking. So this is in connection to a little while ago, there was a God, what was it? I think they actually say it in this article, but I'm not going to go through I'm not going to go and read the entire article. Basically, there was a conspiracy theory that came out of QAnon a little while ago about furniture, right? And what it was is that there was this particular website that was selling furniture, and the furniture had female names, you know, like it'd be called like Sally and Kaylee and blah, 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 right? And the theory was that the furniture was being shipped with actual children inside of him, and the whole thing was a cover for human trafficking being done online. And like it was like, was it like IKEA furniture or something like that? It was some like, and it was the kind of thing like when you would hear this, you would just be like, what the fuck? Like it was the stupidest fucking thing like I've ever imagined. Like, okay, you know, I don't know if you've heard about that, but yeah, that's what it was. It was like the idea was that this furniture company was shipping children inside of their cabinets. And the cabinets were just the right size for a child to fit in, and that's why they were, you know, the cabinets were being sold under women's names and all this other crap. And it was like, it was the dumbest thing, like, ever. The dumbest fucking thing ever, right? And anyway, this article is all about how you have these people who are calling in all of this stuff. And it's like gumming up the works because, you know, these people take it seriously. So, you know, you call a group like this, you know, in order to like, what was this group called again? You call a group like the Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking or whatnot, and you tell them, yeah, this website is engaging in human trafficking. They take it seriously. They go and they investigate, and you know, they find out that no, this is just some wacky conspiracy theory. And then another guy calls with another stupid conspiracy theory, and they investigate that, and they find out no, there's no truth to that either. And before you know it, they're getting 20, 50, 60 calls a fucking day from these conspiracy theory types, taking up all their goddamn time, and they're not able to do their work, and it actually ends up becoming detrimental, right? That's really the consequence of not fact-checking, of allowing lies like this to go by and not challenging them, right? That's what happens basically when Facebook decides they're not going to police content on their sites, and they're not going to try to curb disinformation, right? And it has, you know, because we forget that, you know, we think about, okay, it's just freedom of speech, blah, 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 whatever, right? We forget that, you know, misinformation like this, you know, racism like this, you know, spreading fake news for political reasons, that kind of thing, has an actual human cost attached to it, right? You know, and this is just happens to be one of those cases where it's most readily apparent. You know, this basically conspiracy theorists getting in the way of investigators who are trying to close down human trafficking rings, right? This is just one example, a very, very visual, a very easy to understand example, right? It's not so easy to understand fake news and its effect on something that you can't see in front of you, like, say, climate change, for example. You know, not so easy to see that. You know, when you just see it, you just see, like, some story that's whatever, and then, okay, yeah, that might be true, it might not be, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But this is a pretty good example right here of how that can be damaging to something, you know. Because of that, these guys have to take time to deal with this bullshit instead of going out there and trying to help, you know, real-life victims of human trafficking, right? And, you know, and you can't blame people for wanting to do the right thing. And I think that's the really screwed up part about this, is that a lot of these people, a lot of these QAnon people and all that stuff, think they're doing the right thing. You know, they think that, okay, well, we see this website that's like, you know, engaging in fishy behavior, we better report it. Somebody needs to know, oh, there's this pizza place in Washington, they've got a torture dungeon, blah, 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 blah. I better get down there and stop it, etc., etc. They think they're doing the right thing. Their hearts are in the right place. It's just that their minds are fucking turned into Swiss cheese because they subscribe to all this ridiculous right-wing bullshit. And that's the problem, you know. Guys like Tim Pool and this other fucking asshole, whatever his name was, Ian Miles Chung, and people like, you know, and I would even include in this group people like fucking, I would even include people like, say, Rush Limbaugh in this group, Sean Hannity, right? You know, fucking Laura Ingraham, those types of people. They're just as guilty. They're just as guilty as, say, Alex Jones or something when it comes to this shit. Just maybe not so much with the conspiracy crap, but definitely with the pushing lies for a political agenda angle. Yes, you know, this is the real example. This is the real the real measurable outcome of what happens when no one challenges lies like this, right? And we can't really rely on Facebook to do this for us, or Twitter or Reddit. We shouldn't have to rely on them for it. You know, we should push back against it ourselves. I mean, here's the thing: is that we have access to these platforms just the same way Ian Milestrong or Twitter, or whatnot, or Project Veritas or Tim Pool does, right? We have access to these platforms as well, and we should take advantage of them and fight it on that grounds too, because it's not all. That's one method: fact checking and boycotting and trying to get these companies to police this type of hurtful, harmful content is one way you can push back against it. Another way you can push back against it is by making your own content, supporting the content creators that actually do go out and tell the truth. That's part of the reason why I decided to make videos, and that's part of the reason why I decided to make videos about political content. When I first started on YouTube, it was all basically atheist stuff. That was my main inspiration. Way back in, it was like 2008, 2009 when I first started making videos, somewhere around there. And it was all that was the big debate, the atheist debate. And it's kind of evolved into other things since then. The conversation has moved on, although there are still some pretty high profile atheist YouTubers out there. Aaron Raw, for example, is still pretty active. Other people like, say, TJ Kirk have moved on to other subjects, although he still does atheist videos once in a while, stuff like that. But I decided when I made my own videos, I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to stick to although I have made religious videos about religion and stuff. I decided kind of from the get-go that my content was going to be about politics, because this is the reason why. Because even back then, it was very, very lopsided. There are not, even now, even right now, there are not a lot of progressive voices out there in the mainstream. There's a couple on YouTube. There's certainly a lot of progressive voices when it comes to things like, gender issues. People like ContraPoints or whatnot, trans issues, right? If you've never watched ContraPoints, she's amazing. ContraPoints is one of my heroes. You should definitely check her out. There's plenty of those people. There's plenty of people that talk about that kind of thing. There's plenty of people that talk about, like gender issues and trans issues and racism, stuff like that. Not so many that talk about politics. And so that's why I decided to hitch my boat to this. Because this is where I think even with the small number of people that I reach every day, I think, given now in this stream, I think that the maximum, let me see, so far, it looks like 5 people concurrently once on this stream, which is actually kind of, not very many, right? But even with that, something that low, I still think I'm able to, this is how I'm best able to make a difference, right? Even if I'm only reaching 5 people at a time. That's fine. I don't care, It's, kind of what I want to talk about. Because people, I'm doing what I feel, what I can, to kind of even that playing field a little bit. Because out there in the mainstream, progressive voices are not heard very much at all. Not very much at all. Even all those people that I mentioned that I listened to at the beginning of this, people like David Pakman or Kyle Kalinske or whatnot, those guys are not in the mainstream. They're like radio hosts on YouTube, and they have like radio shows and stuff like that. They're not even close to like the type of numbers that somebody like, say, Sean Hannity gets. Right? Not even close. Maybe the Young Turks are. But yeah, progressive voices on the internet and in the mainstream in general are very much in the minority out there in this country. And it's like, you know, the reason I really think that is the case is because they're less likely to compromise, right? They are less likely to compromise, and so when it comes to advertisers, they're less likely to toe the line and tone down their content in order to appeal to advertisers, right? So I think that's one thing that's kind of been a natural check that has worked against progressive voices in mainstream media for a lot of years, you know. Uh, but I don't know. I mean, it looks to me like it could be growing, it could be going down. I don't really know, right? We'll see. But this is why I make the videos that I make. You know, this is why I make videos where 90% of my comments are people telling me to fuck off and whatnot. And you know what? I don't care. It's great. The fact that I get anybody at all to watch what I do and listen to what I say is good enough. And even if I make these videos for the rest of my life, and you know the channel never really grows much more beyond what it is, that would be fine with me as well, and I wouldn't care. So, okay, this is putting us at 2 hours. Let's see. I think we made a lot of progress this time around. Starting to do a little bit of detail. What time is it? It's 10 o'clock. Why don't we go ahead and end this early? Yeah, I usually do, you know, when I do these, it's usually like, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, something like that. It's been almost 2 hours. Besides, it's a school night. I'm kind of tired, so yeah, maybe we'll end this right now. Anyway, but I think our illustration here is starting to shape up, starting to actually look like a real thing, ain't it? Kind of, sort of, almost, you know. Just have to kind of go in now and put in some more shadows and highlights and things, and then fill in some of these little details. I got a bunch of rocks and mushrooms and all this other crap. And yeah, and then you go over it again and fill in the darken it a little bit. Some of the pen work, you can't really see it after you paint it like that, so I'll have to go in afterwards with a pen and kind of darken some of this stuff. But I think it's coming along. I think it's looking all right. So anyway, why don't we go ahead and end this for now. I think we had a pretty tight stream. And let's see. Before we go, I need to do my end and talk here. So let me just open up all of my websites here. Instagram. I really should just take some time and film a little ending sequence instead of having to do this live every single time. I should really just go in and just film it. But anyway, so I have a Patreon, which is at Hwanja / or Patreon / Hwanja. You know, just search for me there. And if you like what I do and you want to support me, you can support me on Patreon, which is always nice. If you don't want to join Patreon, but you still want to support the channel, I have an Etsy shop. I will put this down in the description of the video so that you can, you know, see this stuff, right? And I sell prints. This is Hwanja's House of Weirdness on Etsy. I sell a bunch of prints and things. You know, these are usually monsters and that kind of thing. So this is, for example, a Lovecraft character that I made a print out of. You know, this one's very popular, actually. And then, like, I have stuff like Cthulhu, you know. This is Cthulhu from Lovecraft, that kind of thing. So if you like what I do and you like and you want to support the channel, consider buying something from my Etsy shop. You know, these are roughly 11 by 17 handmade prints. And I can actually show you what one of them looks like. Let me just pull one out here. Alright, let me turn off my monitor. Bickety bam. Just to kind of show you what they look like, here's one of those prints that you were just looking at. This is another Lovecraft character. And what I do is I hand stain the each piece. So the stain, the marbling on it looks different for each one. And then I sort of tear up the sides and then, you know, and it's kind of cool, and the texture makes it feel like it's sort of leathery. So this is what they look like in real life. Each one comes out a little different, so if you order one, it will be unique. You will have one that is unique to you. So yeah, that's what I sell on my Etsy shop, and if you like what I do and you want to support me, please consider buying one of my things on Etsy. If you like my artwork in general, I have a DeviantArt site here. I usually post comics and stuff on it, you know. And this'll have like full colored photoshopped pieces. Like here's one ninja with a chainsaw arms that I did a little while ago. Right. So if you like my art and you want to see more of my art, here's another one, disco zombie thing that I did in 2010. Wow, that was a while ago. Etc, etc, etc. If you like what I do and you want to see more, you know, lots of monsters and shit like that, please check me out on DeviantArt. I'll put the link in the thing. I also have a Instagram at Dirty Kitchen Press, and I usually post sketches and things like that. I also post, this is a sculpture that I did a little while ago. In fact, I should pull that over here and show it to you guys, since we got all this time. But yeah, you know, on Instagram I usually post sketches and doodles and that sort of thing. So this will be like, you know, mainly artwork. Sometimes I'll put comics on there. But most of the time this will be stuff that you won't see on my DeviantArt site. Off video caption left monitor. There we go. This is that sculpture that was just on that Instagram site that you saw there. I made this. This is sort of like a... You know, I make stuff like this. It's like, I use paper and latex, and, you know, these are like pirate teeth that I, like, took, and this little veins and all that stuff is made with, like, this modeling compound. And, yeah, and I usually sell shit like this. This is actually, I'm going to list this on the Etsy shop if anybody wants to buy it. I'll take lots of nice photos of it and stick it up there, so, you know, make these weird, disgusting little creatures. Anyway, there's that, and let's turn on our monitor again, and follow me on Etsy. And then I also have a webcomic. This is Hwanja.com. Fun for the whole stupid family, and this is the Hwanja webcomic, which it's like ninjas, and he fights demons, and blah, 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 blah. You know, it's basically, this one is like some martial arts, kung fu sort of thing, you know, where they're all fighting. And then I also have another comic, Dirty Kitchen Comics, which is... This is more of a funny webcomic sort of thing, right? So, a little more random. Each one is different, so let's just choose like a random one, right? There we go, there's another random one. And that is at Hwanja.com. So if you like what I do and you want to see some of my comics, please check me out there. And I will put links to all of this stuff in the comments section. Anyway, I think that's it for now, folks. We'll go ahead. It's been about almost 2 hours, kind of a shorter stream this time. I will most likely do another one on Saturday, and we'll see. Maybe we can get through all of the prepared material again. Wow. I think that's the first time I've ever managed to pull that off. So thank you so much. I see that there are still a few people watching, even all the way towards the end. So thank you so much, whoever you are. And see you on Saturday. Adios.